Say it again!
The executive snapped, voice sharp with amusement. Slowly this time. Maybe we'll understand you. A few people laughed. Someone sighed. The maintenance worker stood still, palms relaxed, eyes steady, absorbing the insult like background noise. Then he answered, softly, fluently, in perfect formal Japanese. The laughter died, the room went silent, and the CEO went pale. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. Because what looked like a janitor being mocked wasn't really about language at all. It was about power assuming it was safe. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, as polished shoes shifted on marble. The maintenance worker didn't raise his voice or straighten his uniform. He didn't need to. He'd said enough. The words hung there, precise and respectful, the kind of Japanese learned in boardrooms, not break rooms. He was Rayan Malik, a single father, night maintenance, the man who fixed what others never noticed until it broke. Calm lived in him now, not because he was fearless, but because panic had never paid a bill or tucked a child into bed. He'd learned long ago that dignity didn't announce itself. It waited. The CEO, Emiko Tanaka, recovered first. Her face smoothed back into something controlled, professional, but the crack had already shown. She dismissed the moment with a clipped gesture, as if swatting away an inconvenience, and turned back to the executives crowding the glass-walled meeting space. Business resumed, brittle and forced. Rayan stepped back into the service corridor where he belonged. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The scent of cleaning solvent clung to his sleeves. This was familiar ground. Safe ground. Places where people like Emiko Tanaka never looked twice. He checked his watch. Too early to leave. Too late to pretend the encounter hadn't happened. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. A reminder alarm, medication. He pictured his daughter at home, asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, trusting the world to hold together through the night. That trust was a weight he carried everywhere. The building answered his steps with quiet echoes as he moved toward the lower mechanical floors. Above him, money flowed through glass and steel. Below, systems breathed, pipes, servers, power relays, all the unseen things that kept the illusion alive. He paused at a control panel, fingers brushing the casing out of habit. The vibration felt off. Too fast, too uneven. Rayan frowned, listening, counting in his head. The rhythm didn't match the baseline he knew by heart. Somewhere above, Emiko Tanaka was speaking confidently about projections and partnerships. Somewhere below, something was starting to slip. Rayan logged the anomaly, then logged another. Minor alerts, easily ignored by people who trusted dashboards more than instincts. He didn't escalate. Not yet. He'd learned what happened when men like him spoke too early. As he worked, fragments of the earlier moment replayed, the command to repeat himself, the laughter, the sudden fear when comprehension landed. He hadn't planned that response. It had simply been accurate, necessary. The intercom crackled with a brief announcement about a visiting delegation arriving ahead of schedule. Footsteps multiplied above. Energy shifted. The building felt it too. Rayan tightened a valve and wiped his hands on a rag. The vibration spiked again. This time, sharper, his jaw set. He keyed into the system deeper than his role technically allowed, moving with practiced ease through layers most technicians never saw. The architecture was familiar, intimate. A warning flashed, then another. Upstairs, voices would soon rise. Down here, the truth was already speaking. Rayan exhaled slowly. He thought of his daughter's laugh. of promises made quietly over burnt toast and late nights. He straightened, shoulders loose, mind clear. Whatever was coming, he was ready. He stood there for a second longer, hand resting on the panel, listening. The vibration climbed again. A thin whine threading through steel. His radio crackled with overlapping voices. Tense now, clipped. Someone upstairs asked about a delay. Someone else snapped back. He logged the spike, tagged the timestamp, and closed the casing. Whatever was happening wasn't a loose bolt. It was systemic, layered, patient. He took the stairs 2 at a time, boots echoing, mind already mapping routes, redundancies, consequences, the way it used to before. Mistakes cost more than pride. Tonight demanded focus, restraint, and silence from him. The stairwell opened near the service lobby, where glass met concrete and class met labor. He slowed, smoothing his shirt, becoming invisible again. Voices spilled from the conference room, sharp with confidence. Emiko Tanaka's tone carried, measured, impatient. "We're already behind," she said, irritation thinly masked. He kept moving, cartwheels rattling softly. A junior manager spotted him, hesitated, then looked away. He felt the building's pulse underfoot. A living thing stressed beyond comfort, warning quietly before it screamed. Every instinct urged him to speak, but timing mattered. Exposure worked best when witnesses couldn't look away. All lessons remembered clearly. He turned into the supply alcove, pretending to inventory, while alarms stayed just below threshold. His phone buzzed again. A photo preview bloomed. His daughter asleep, medication bottle aligned by the bed. He swallowed and typed a reminder to himself. "If you're still with me, subscribe and stick around, because moments like this decide everything." The building shuddered faintly. A tremor felt more than heard. He adjusted a breaker setting within limits, buying minutes. Upstairs, applause broke out, misplaced. Down here, the clock kept moving. His sweat cooled along his spine despite the air conditioning. He counted breaths carefully until footsteps approached him. Footsteps stopped outside the alcove. A voice cleared its throat. Mika Tanue hovered there, eyes darting. "Facilities flagged something?" she asked, trying casual. He nodded once, careful. "Minor variance," he said, "stacked." She frowned, understanding enough to worry, not enough to act. Upstairs, Emiko's voice rose again, decisive, dismissive. A laugh followed. Mika lowered her voice. "They don't want interruptions." He met her gaze, steady. "They'll get consequences instead." The building hummed louder, agreeing. She hesitated, torn between protocol and instinct. He turned back to the panel, already deciding next steps. Lights flickered once, twice. Somewhere, metal groaned softly overhead. The flicker rippled outward. Monitors upstairs would show green, then amber. He knew the sequence. Years ago, he'd written contingencies for it, argued budgets, lost. Now he was mopping around ghosts of decisions. He keyed a private channel. "We need to slow intake," he said. Static answered. A supervisor replied, annoyed, "Stay in your lane." He closed his eyes briefly. Pride wasn't the enemy. Delay was. He rerouted load legally, quietly, shaving risk while buying truth time. The hum deepened, a warning bell without sound. He felt watched, yet utterly alone. Above, glass reflected confidence like armor. It cracked soon. An alert finally tripped. Red this time. The conference room doors flew open, voices spilling into the lobby. Emiko strode out, heels sharp, eyes scanning for answers. She saw him by the cart and frowned. "You," she said. He pointed. "What did you touch?" He straightened slowly. "Nothing I wasn't allowed to." he replied. Murmurs gathered, phones lifted. He felt the pivot approaching. Public rooms had gravity. Truth fell fast when dropped here. Mika edged closer, conflicted, eyes pleading for restraint. The building answered with another shudder, undeniable. Screens behind glass flashed warnings no one could ignore. Silence followed briefly afterward. Emiko's gaze hardened. Authority moved to crush uncertainty. "Clear the area," she ordered. Security hesitated, then complied. He didn't move. "If you shut it down wrong," he said, measured, "you'll cascade failure." She scoffed. "From maintenance?" The word cut. He nodded. "From the person who knows this system." A beat. The alarms climbed. Witnesses pressed in. Curiosity overpowering fear. The moment stretched, balanced. Exposure demanded patience. He had it. His heartbeat stayed slow, trained, obedient. Somewhere cameras rolled, capturing arrogance meeting calm. The lobby smelled of ozone and polished stone. He waited for her decision. It came too late now. The system lurched. Lights dimmed across floors. A child cried somewhere. Emiko's confidence cracked audibly. "Fix it," she snapped, to anyone. He stepped forward, voice calm. "Authorize me." She stared, trapped by eyes and evidence. After a breath, she nodded. He moved fast, fingers flying, calling steps aloud. Graphs stabilized, air returned. Relief rippled. Phones captured everything. If you want to see how preparation beats power, subscribe now. This was only the opening reveal. Witnesses whispered, realizing the story had shifted. Emiko swallowed, watching control leave her hands. The building steadied, but judgment loomed. Everyone felt it coming. Right then, she didn't thank him. Emiko Tanaka simply straightened her jacket and scanned the lobby, already reshaping the narrative in her head. Security relaxed, cameras kept rolling, and executives whispered as systems stabilized. The man stepped back to the panel, confirming steady metrics, breathing evenly while adrenaline drained. The building exhaled, but the room stayed tense. "Who authorized that access?" Emiko asked, voice controlled, sharp edges hidden. Mika hovered nearby, torn. He wiped his hands on the rag, eyes on the data. "Temporary clearance," he said. "Logged, you'll see it." A murmur spread. Phones lifted higher. Authority hates witnesses. Emiko turned to the room, reclaiming space. "We'll continue upstairs," she said, dismissive. "Facilities will debrief later." She glanced at him. "You're done here." The words landed heavy, meant to put him back where power never looks. He nodded once, then spoke before leaving. "If you continue without load balancing, you'll trip redundancy B in 8 minutes. Silence snapped back. She scoffed. "That's speculation." He met her gaze, calm. "It's math." A timer chimed softly from the panel, cruelly polite. Someone gasped. The room leaned in. Executives checked tablets. Amber crept across screens again. Emiko's jaw tightened. "Reset the projection," she ordered. The lead engineer hesitated. "It won't hold," he said. The maintenance worker stepped closer, pointing. "Your override conflicts with legacy routing." The word legacy rippled. Mika's eyes widened. "That routing predates the merger," she said quietly. Heads turned. Emiko waved it off. "Enough. Clear him out." Security shifted, uncertain. The man didn't resist. He simply waited. The timer ticked. 7 minutes. 6. The building hummed louder, offended by denial. A board member cleared her throat. "What's the alternative?" Emiko shot her a look, then back to him. "You've had your moment." He shook his head. "Not a moment. A warning." He described steps succinctly. hands sketching invisible pathways. The lead engineer followed, nodding despite himself. Screens stabilized briefly. Applause tried to start, then died. "Who are you?" someone asked from the back. He didn't answer. Names complicate survival. Results don't. The timer paused at 3 minutes. Relief rippled again, fragile. Emiko stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You embarrassed me." He shrugged slightly. "I prevented a failure." Her smile was thin. "This company rewards loyalty." He met it evenly. "This company forgets its foundations." The words cut deeper than insult. Witnesses felt it. She turned sharply. "Meeting adjourned." People hesitated, hungry for resolution. Mika stayed, eyes flicking between them. "We should document what just happened," she said. Emiko froze, then nodded stiffly. Cameras kept recording. Down the corridor, the man packed his tools. His phone buzzed, a message from home. "Fever's down." He exhaled. 8 minutes saved meant a night intact. He closed the kit carefully, like a promise. Behind him, voices argued. Emiko demanded reports. Engineers debated fixes. Someone pulled archived schematics. A name appeared in a footer, half familiar. Mika leaned closer, frowning. "It can't be," she whispered. The discovery began without ceremony. The man wheeled the cart toward the elevators. He'd done enough for now. Exposure works best when it ripens. As doors closed, the building hummed steady at last. Upstairs, denial cracked. Down below, he waited, ready for the next call. It would come soon. Outside the elevators, alarm softened to a whisper, but tension clung. He checked the service log, annotating cleanly, anticipating scrutiny. Protocol demanded names. He left fields blank. Anonymity bought time. The intercom announced a temporary pause, voices brittle. Somewhere, a child laughed, startling him, and he smiled despite himself. Mika caught up as doors reopened. She lowered her voice, breathless. "They're pulling historical records," she said. "Your comments triggered flags." He nodded, unsurprised. "They should," he replied. She studied him, searching. "Why stay quiet?" He answered honestly. "Because noise invites ego, evidence invites truth." Above, Emiko paced, temper leashed by optics. She drafted emails framing control, not gratitude. Yet uncertainty gnawed. The building had chosen a side tonight. Metrics don't lie. She hated that. She hated witnesses more. The man stepped out onto the loading level, cool air kissing his face. He texted home, "On my way after checks." His daughter sent a heart. The night felt lighter. He knew consequences would follow. Disciplinary meetings, whispered threats, maybe termination. He also knew leverage had shifted. Public rooms remember. He returned to the console for one final sweep. Fingers sure, mind clear. A signature pattern blinked. His own old safeguard, dormant until stress awakened it. He smiled faintly. Someone upstairs would see that too. When they did, questions would multiply. The cart rolled back into shadow. The building settled. And somewhere above, a CEO realized control had limits, and that limits had names. By morning, consequences would surface publicly, and denial would cost more than humility ever had, for those who learned too late tonight alone. Morning crept into the tower without ceremony, gray light sliding along glass and steel as if nothing unusual had happened. The building looked calm, cooperative, obedient. Inside, it was anything but. Emails multiplied overnight, threaded with urgency and careful wording. Committees formed, logs were requested, questions circled without landing. He returned for his shift early, coffee untouched, senses alert. After nights like that, systems rarely stayed quiet. He passed through security, badge scanned, eyes briefly lifting to him before sliding away. Word traveled fast here, but truth moved slower. The service corridor smelled faintly of ozone still. He paused at the control room, checking baselines. Stable, for now. His phone vibrated with a calendar notice he didn't recognize. Mandatory review, facilities and operations, executive level. He closed it without comment. Meetings were arenas. He preferred preparation. Upstairs, Emiko Tanaka stood at the head of a long table, jaw tight, hands folded precisely. Screens glowed with charts, timelines, blame vectors. She listened as engineers spoke around the truth, careful not to say his role aloud. Each omission felt deliberate. Mika sat halfway down, notes meticulous, eyes flicking to the door whenever footsteps passed, and the chair at the end remained empty, conspicuous. "Bring him in," Emiko finally said, irritation leaking through control. The door opened. He entered quietly, uniform neat, posture relaxed. The room shifted, attention pulling toward him despite efforts to resist. He didn't sit until indicated. Emiko gestured sharply. He took the seat, folding his hands loosely, eyes attentive. The air felt thinner here, rarefied by power and pride. "We need an explanation," Emiko began. "Unauthorized access, public confusion, risk exposure." He nodded, letting her list grow. When she finished, he spoke evenly. Access was authorized under emergency protocol, logged. The exposure existed before intervention. He glanced at the screen. "Your charts confirm that." A few heads turned, surprised by the calm certainty. The lead engineer cleared his throat. "He's right," he said reluctantly. "The anomaly predates last night." Emiko's eyes flashed. "That's not the issue," she snapped. "The issue is hierarchy." The word rang like a gavel. He felt the familiar pressure of it, the old game resurfacing. He met it without flinching. "Hierarchy doesn't move electrons," he said. "Design does." A murmur rippled. Mika looked down, hiding a smile she couldn't quite suppress. Emiko leaned back, studying him as if recalculating a threat. "You speak with confidence beyond your role," she said coolly. "Where did you learn this?" He shrugged slightly, from systems that fail when people ignore them. She didn't like that answer. She waved a hand. "We'll investigate. Until then, you're restricted from core access." Security nodded. A small punishment, symbolic, meant to reassert order. He accepted it without protest. "Then restrict the override too," he said. "Otherwise you'll recreate the cascade." Silence followed. Charts flickered as if agreeing. Emiko hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Done." The meeting adjourned stiffly. As people filed out, glances lingered. Curiosity edged out contempt. Mika caught up with him in the hallway. "They're digging," she whispered. "Old code signatures, procurement records." He nodded. "They should," she swallowed. "Why didn't you tell them who you are?" He considered. "Because identity distracts. Evidence doesn't." Back downstairs, he resumed rounds, smaller tasks now filling time. Filters changed, valves calibrated, floors polished where executives never looked. The restriction badge weighed heavier than metal. It was a line drawn. He respected lines until they endangered lives, and then lines moved. Mid-morning, alarms pinged softly. Not red, not yet. He checked remotely, frustration blooming. Restricted access meant blind spots. He documented, flagged, waited, minutes stretched. The building pulsed uneasily. He felt it in his bones. Somewhere above, Emiko would be briefing partners, projecting control. Somewhere below, consequences gathered. His phone buzzed. A message from Mika. "They found your signature." His breath caught briefly. Another followed, legacy safeguard. Bored, asking questions. He exhaled slowly, grounding himself. Exposure ripens. At home, his daughter would wake soon, cereal spilled, questions asked. He pictured her smile, the way she trusted him to fix things. That trust steadied him more than any credential. He tightened a bolt, listening. The hum deepened again, unmistakable now. He keyed the intercom. "Facilities flagging renewed instability," he said calmly. A supervisor sighed. "Noted." He closed his eyes for a beat. Denial always came first. Upstairs, Emiko's assistant interrupted her briefing, pale. "Ma'am, redundancy B is trending again." Emiko's jaw clenched. She thought of the man downstairs, of witnesses, of cameras. Authority wavered. "Call him," she said quietly. The words tasted bitter. The call came seconds later. He answered without triumph. "I warned you," he said gently. She swallowed her pride. "What do we do?" The question hung heavy, heard by others. Public rooms remember. He gave instructions succinctly, measured. Systems responded. Stability returned. Silence followed, thick with realization. Emiko stared at the table, seeing not power, but dependence. Down below, he logged the fix. Hands steady. The building sighed. Somewhere, justice shifted a fraction closer. He checked the time. Almost lunch. Almost another meeting. Almost a reckoning. She didn't raise her voice this time. Emiko Tanaka stood near the conference table, phone still warm in her hand, watching engineers execute the steps he dictated. Screens steadied, lines flattened. Relief moved through the room like a held breath finally released. No one applauded. They just stared, recalibrating what they thought they knew. Downstairs, he confirmed the final readings and leaned back against the console. The hum softened to its proper pitch. He logged the sequence, careful, thorough. This wasn't a victory lap. It was evidence. Footsteps hurried toward him, then slowed. Mika appeared, eyes bright with something like fear and respect tangled together. "They're calling an emergency session," she said. "Board level. They want you present." He wiped his hands, nodding once. "Then it's time." The words surprised even him with their calm. The restriction badge still hung at his chest, symbolic now. He followed her upstairs, service corridors giving way to glass and carpet. Phones were already out. Whispers tracked their movement. Public rooms remember. The boardroom doors closed behind them with a heavy finality. Faces turned. Emiko sat centered, composed, though tension traced her shoulders. "We had a second instability," she said to the room. "It was resolved." She gestured toward him. "By facilities." The word landed differently now. A director leaned forward. "We reviewed the code signature that stabilized the system," she said. "It matches a safeguard designed 12 years ago. Pre-merger." Murmurs rose. Another director tapped a tablet. "Authored by an external consultant we never fully integrated." Eyes shifted toward him. He remained still. Emiko's gaze sharpened. "Explain," she said. "Not a command, a request." He met it. "The safeguard reroutes load when executive overrides ignore physical limits," he said. "It was designed to protect people from themselves." A few smiles flickered, quickly suppressed. "Why wasn't it documented?" someone asked. He shrugged slightly. "It was. It lost budget priority." Silence answered. The truth settled uncomfortably. Mika cleared her throat. "There's more," she said, voice steady. "Procurement archives show the consultant later declined a permanent role after recommending structural changes that were rejected." She glanced at him. "The name matches." All eyes locked in. He exhaled slowly. "I was that consultant," he said. Before tonight, it didn't matter. Emiko closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had shifted. "You designed the backbone we're still using," she said. He nodded, and warned what would happen if it was stressed this way. Phones captured the moment. Authority doesn't like mirrors. A director asked softly, "Why maintenance?" He answered honestly, "It paid the bills, it kept me close to the systems, and it let me raise my daughter." The room quieted, humanity intruding where metrics ruled. Emiko straightened. "You should have disclosed." He met her evenly. "You should have listened." The line cut cleanly. Witnesses inhaled together. The chairwoman spoke at last. "This isn't disciplinary," she said. "This is corrective." She turned to Emiko. "Effective immediately. We review override policies and reinstate legacy safeguards." Then, to him, "We need you." The words carried weight. He considered, thinking of fever nights and quiet breakfasts. "I'll consult," he said, "on one condition." Heads tilted. "Transparency," he continued. "No more burying warnings." Agreement rippled. Emiko nodded once, slow. Agreed. The admission cost her. Cameras caught it anyway. Public exposure doesn't shout, it documents. As the meeting adjourned, messages pinged across devices. Clips spread. If you're seeing this unfold and believe quiet competence deserves the spotlight, subscribe now and stay with us. This shift didn't happen by accident. In the hallway, Micah let out a shaky laugh. "You did it." He shook his head. "We did what was necessary." He checked his phone. A photo arrived, his daughter awake, smiling. A cereal everywhere. He smiled back, grounding himself. Behind glass, Emiko watched him go. Pride bruised, perspective altered. Power had failed. Preparation hadn't. The building hummed steady again, bearing witness to a truth now impossible to unsee. He paused by the elevator, hand hovering as doors slid open. Conversations hushed around him, eyes following with a new calculus. Some nodded, some looked away. Respect arrived unevenly, but it arrived. He stepped inside, mirror walls reflecting a man still in work boots, still carrying tools, now carrying leverage. As the elevator rose, his phone vibrated again. A calendar update replaced the restriction notice. Consulting access granted. Temporary, conditional. He smiled faintly. Conditions could be met. When the doors opened, he returned to the floor that breathed and groaned. He ran a final check, hands sure, mind settled. The crisis had exposed a pattern. Tomorrow would test whether lessons stuck. He sent one last message home. Late, but steady. The reply came instantly. "Proud of you." He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, then got back to work. The building listened, and the watching crowd finally understood. The building settled into a cautious calm after the boardroom emptied, like an animal that had survived a close call and hadn't decided whether to trust the quiet. He moved through the lower levels again, consulting badge warm against his chest. The access it granted both familiar and strange. Screens recognized him now. Doors unlocked without hesitation. That change felt heavier than applause ever could. He started with the basics, verifying each subsystem manually. Sensors lie when dashboards don't. The hum stayed true, a low, steady note that let his shoulders drop a fraction. Above him, executives recalibrated egos and schedules. Below, pipes and relays accepted discipline without argument. He preferred this world. It rewarded attention. Mika's footsteps approached, careful, as if she didn't want to startle him. "They're drafting a statement," she said. "Careful language, no names yet." He nodded. "Names come later," he replied. "Stability comes first." She watched him work, eyes following patterns she was only beginning to see. "You could have taken the credit outright," she said. He tightened a fitting, then looked at her. "Credit without change is decoration." An alert chimed, softer this time, diagnostic rather than alarm. He pulled up the trace, lips pressing together. "There," he said, pointing. "That's the pressure point they keep ignoring." Mika leaned in. "Can we fix it?" He considered. "We can mitigate. A real fix needs approval they don't like." She smiled thinly. "I'll help you make it undeniable." Upstairs, Emiko Tanaka sat alone in her office, jacket folded, hands braced on the desk. The glass reflected her expression back at her, sharper than she liked. She replayed the footage in her mind. The calm voice, the charts obeying him, the room watching her choose humility. Power hadn't disappeared. It had been reframed. She hated that it made sense. Her assistant knocked lightly. "The chair wants a follow-up plan," she said. Emiko nodded. "Include him," she replied after a beat. Saying it still stung. She inhaled, then exhaled slowly, choosing forward motion over resentment. Back below, he compiled a report that read like a map through a minefield. No flourishes, just causality. When Mika sent it up, responses came quickly, sharper than before. Questions asked the right way. Resistance softened into caution. He felt the shift like a tide turning. A junior tech hovered nearby, eyes wide. "Sir, can you look at this?" He smiled faintly. Titles confuse people. He glanced, adjusted a parameter, and handed it back. "Good catch," he said. The tech beamed. Confidence spreads when modeled. His phone buzzed. A video call request from home. He hesitated, then accepted. His daughter's face filled the screen, hair wild, grin missing a tooth. "You fixed the big building?" she asked. He laughed softly. "I helped," he said. "Did you take your medicine?" She nodded solemnly, then whispered, "I'm proud of you." The words landed deeper than any board decision. He ended the call with a promise to be home soon. The report pinged back with approvals attached. Conditional, but real. He moved quickly, implementing mitigations that bought weeks, maybe months. The building responded immediately, the hum smoothing further. He logged everything, conscious of eyes now following his cursor. Emiko appeared on the floor minutes later, heels muted, presence undeniable. Conversations paused. She stopped beside him, watching the data stabilize. "You were right," she said quietly. "Not a performance, a fact." He nodded once. "We can do better," he replied. She studied him, then the screens. "Show me," she said. They worked side by side, the contrast stark, tailored suit beside work boots, authority beside expertise. He explained without condescension. She listened without interrupting. When she asked questions, they cut to the heart. Witnesses noticed. Phones stayed mostly pocketed this time. Some moments deserve privacy to change. When it was done, she straightened. "We'll present this together," she said. He considered, then agreed. "For the building," he said. She nodded. "For the people," she corrected, surprising herself. As she left, Mika exhaled a breath she'd been holding all day. "You just changed the culture," she said. He shook his head. "Cultures resist, we nudged it." He returned to the console for one last sweep, fingers tracing familiar paths. The system held. Outside, afternoon light angled through service windows, dust motes floating like quiet witnesses. He packed his tools slowly, savoring the steadiness. Upstairs, emails landed with subject lines that would have been unthinkable yesterday. Reviews scheduled. Budgets reopened. Names finally attached. None of it felt like triumph. It felt like responsibility expanding. He checked the time. He could make it home for dinner. He sent a message. On my way. The reply came back instantly, a string of hearts. As he headed for the exit, the building hummed behind him, steadier now, listening. Public exposure had done its work, not by spectacle, but by forcing truth into the light. Tomorrow would test whether it stayed there. Tonight, it was enough. He stepped out into the early evening with the weight of the day still sitting between his shoulders, not heavy anymore, just present. The tower behind him glowed, windows reflecting a sky that hadn't decided on night yet. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was sneaking out of a place that never wanted him. He felt finished, at least for today. His phone buzzed as he crossed the parking structure. Mika again, emergency briefing tomorrow morning, full floor. They want you there from the start. He stopped walking for a moment, reading it twice. From the start, that was new. He typed back a simple understood and slipped the phone away. At home, the smell of overcooked pasta greeted him along with a laugh that erased most of the day's tension. His daughter ran into him, arms wrapping around his waist, face pressed into his work shirt without caring about grease stains or exhaustion. He lifted her easily, relief settling into his chest like warmth. This was the point of everything. Over dinner, she talked about school and a drawing she'd made of Daddy fixing the lights. He listened, nodding, anchoring himself in normalcy. The building could wait for the night. Systems always did. After she fell asleep, he sat at the small kitchen table with his laptop open, reviewing the report he'd sent earlier, anticipating questions, resistance, reframing. Public exposure never ended with one meeting. It entered a negotiation phase. Morning came too fast. The executive floor felt different when he arrived. Not warmer, not kinder, just more alert. People noticed him openly now. Some smiled, unsure why. Others watched with guarded expressions, calculating what his presence meant for them. He kept moving, steady, unaffected. The briefing room filled quickly. This time, his chair waited near the center, not the edge. He took it without comment. Emiko Tanaka entered last, posture composed, expression unreadable. The screens behind her lit up with the system map he knew better than memory. She didn't start immediately. She looked at him first. "We had a failure of judgment," she said to the room. No preamble. "And we had a correction." A pause. "We need to understand both." Heads lifted, attention sharpened. She gestured to the screen. "He will walk us through the vulnerabilities." No title, no qualifier, just authority transferring the floor. He stood, hands relaxed, voice even as he explained pathways, pressure points, consequences. He spoke in plain terms, no jargon to hide behind. The room leaned in. Questions followed, sharp, defensive at first, then genuine. He answered all of them, sometimes redirecting, sometimes conceding where limits existed. When someone suggested a cosmetic fix, he shook his head. "That buys time," he said, "not safety." Silence followed. Notes were taken. A director cleared her throat. "Why wasn't this raised sooner?" The question hovered, heavy with implication. He didn't look at Emiko when he answered. "It was," he said simply. "It didn't fit priorities." The room absorbed that. No one argued. Emiko stepped in then. "Those priorities changed today," she said. Her voice didn't waver, but something softer edged it now. Acceptance, maybe. "We implement the full corrective plan." She looked at him. "You'll oversee it." Cameras captured the moment. Not as spectacle, but as record. The chairwoman nodded. Agreed. A ripple moved through the room. Some faces tightened, others relaxed. Authority had chosen expertise publicly. That mattered. Afterward, as people filtered out, a few stopped him quietly. Apologies offered without ceremony. Questions asked without ego. He answered what he could and redirected the rest. Mika lingered last. "You see it, right?" she said softly. "They can't unsee you now." He smiled faintly. "Visibility isn't safety," he replied. "Structure is." Downstairs, he returned to the systems, hands back where they belonged. The work felt different with eyes on it, but the principles held. Pressure behaved, flow responded. He documented, trained, corrected. Each adjustment reinforced the truth that had surfaced. Ignoring foundations was expensive. Emiko visited once more, standing beside him in silence as data stabilized. "I built my career on control," she said quietly. "Yesterday showed me its limits." He nodded, not unkind. "Control works when it listens," he replied. She absorbed that, gaze fixed on the screen. By evening, messages had spread beyond the building. Industry channels buzzed with speculation. Clips circulated, stripped of context, then corrected by facts. Public exposure widened. The narrative no longer belonged to one room. He packed his tools as the shift ended, mind already on home. The building hummed steadily, a low, confident sound. He paused, hand resting briefly on the console, feeling the vibration he trusted. This was progress. Not applause, not promotion, but alignment. As he walked out, phone buzzing with another message from home asking what time he'd be back, he realized something fundamental had shifted. The fight wasn't about proving who he was anymore. It was about making sure no one like him was ignored again. And that work was just beginning. The morning after the briefing arrived with a different weight. Not heavier, sharper. He felt it as soon as he stepped onto the floor, the way conversations paused without pretending they hadn't, the way eyes followed not with doubt, but expectation. Preparation replaced reaction now. That was the danger and the opportunity. He started where he always did, at the systems that never slept. Screens bloomed awake as he logged in. Access levels widened. Permissions stacked like cards finally dealt face up. He didn't rush. Public exposure demanded discipline, not theatrics. Every change had to be defensible, repeatable, boring in the best way. Mika joined him with a tablet, already fielding questions from above, acting as buffer and bridge. "They want a timeline," she said. "They want reassurance." He nodded. "They'll get process." Together, they mapped the work ahead. Phased shutdowns, training sessions, audits that would bruise egos and budgets. He annotated calmly, explaining why shortcuts created headlines and patience created safety. She watched, impressed by how he turned pressure into sequence. Word traveled as they worked. People leaned closer, notes multiplied. A culture doesn't pivot loudly, it pivots with clipboards. Upstairs, Emiko Tanaka prepared her own presentation. She'd stripped it of gloss, left only data and decisions. The board expected certainty. She intended to offer accountability. When she reviewed the plan, she didn't edit him down. She asked questions that mattered, then accepted answers that constrained her power. That acceptance would be seen. That mattered more than slogans. Midday brought resistance. A senior director challenged the scope, citing costs. Voices rose. He waited until the room tired of itself, then spoke. "This cost exists whether we admit it or not," he said evenly. "You can pay it now or after someone gets hurt." Silence followed. Someone cleared their throat. The argument ended not with victory, but with inevitability. That was progress. Between sessions, his phone buzzed with a message from home, a photo of homework spread across the table, a question mark scribbled in the margin. He smiled, typed back a quick explanation, promised help later. Anchors matter when rooms tilt. If you're watching this unfold and believe preparation should matter more than titles, subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Training began that afternoon. He stood beside consoles with engineers who'd once dismissed him, showing them how to listen for problems before alarms screamed. He encouraged questions, corrected gently, praised specifically. Confidence grew measurable. Metrics followed. Public exposure works best when it turns into shared competence. Mika pulled him aside near the end. "They're drafting a policy update," she said. "Your language is in it." He considered that, then nodded. Words shape behavior long after meetings end. "Make sure it stays," he said. She smiled. "It will." Emiko visited the floor again, quieter now, observant. She watched an engineer adjust parameters correctly the first time. "That would have been a call to vendors last week," she said. He nodded. "Now it's a habit." She studied him, then the screens. "You're building redundancy in people," she said. He allowed himself a small smile. "Yeah, that's the only kind that lasts." By evening, drafts circulated. Clips from the briefing were contextualized with the documents and outcomes. The narrative shifted from embarrassment to reform. He knew better than to trust narratives, but momentum mattered. He logged the final notes, double-checked baselines, and packed his tools. As he left, the building hummed with a steadier confidence. Preparation had moved from plan to practice. Tomorrow would test it under strain. He welcomed that. At the door, he glanced back once, not for approval, but for alignment. Then he went home, ready to help with homework, ready to sleep, ready for the next proving ground. He paused on the sidewalk, considering the stakes ahead. Policies would harden, pushback would return. The difference now was daylight. Every choice would be measured against what had already been seen, recorded, remembered. He welcomed that constraint. It forced honesty. It forced listening. Tomorrow, he'd stand in rooms that once erased him and insist on questions before answers. Tonight, he'd eat dinner late, check homework twice, and sleep knowing preparation had finally outrun denial. The work would continue without applause, and that suited him. Systems preferred consistency, not praise. He preferred mornings that started quietly and ended with stability. Somewhere above, plans were being rewritten with his fingerprints still invisible, yet undeniable. Somewhere below, machines kept time. He turned toward home, confident that when the next train arrived, it would meet readiness instead of ego. Public memory would hold the rest, and he intended to honor it. With patience, clarity, and resolve, learned the hard way. Tomorrow would prove whether the lesson stuck. He believed it would, because now everyone was watching. And he welcomed that test, fully. The test came sooner than anyone expected. It always did. He felt it before alarms spoke, the way the building's rhythm tightened, the way power drew breath and held it. He'd just finished a walkthrough with 2 junior engineers when the hum dipped, subtle but wrong. He stopped mid-step. The engineers kept talking for half a second longer before noticing his stillness. "Pause," he said quietly. They froze, eyes following his gaze to the panel. Readings flickered, not red, not amber, but unstable in a way dashboards rarely flagged. He leaned in, fingers hovering without touching. "Loads shifting upstream," he murmured. "External pressure." The engineers glanced at each other, then back to the screen. One swallowed. "But there's no alert." "There won't be," he said, "not until it's late." Within minutes, the floor filled with movement. Mika arrived first, already reading messages. "We've got a surge from the regional grid," she said. "Weather-related. Everyone's saying it's manageable." He nodded. "It is," he said, "if we don't pretend it isn't." Upstairs, executives gathered instinctively, muscle memory pulling them toward glass and screens. Emiko Tanaka joined them, expression controlled, eyes sharper than before. "Status," she said. Engineers spoke quickly, confidently, quoting thresholds. He watched from the floor below through shared displays, listening for what wasn't said. "This is where old habits bite," he said to Mika. "They'll wait for permission." She looked at him. "You have it," she replied. He didn't smile. He moved. He initiated the first phase without announcement, rerouting load incrementally, letting the system feel the change before committing. The engineers beside him followed his lead, hands steady, eyes alert. The building responded, tension easing slightly. Above, voices overlapped, surprise creeping in as graphs shifted without catastrophe. Emiko noticed first. "Who authorized Phase 1?" she asked. Silence. Then someone answered, hesitant. "He did." A beat. Emiko nodded once. "Good," she said. The room stilled. That single word traveled faster than any memo. The surge intensified. Weather feeds updated, projections darkened. Phones came out. Cameras, too. Public exposure had widened beyond the building now. Industry watchers tuned in. He felt it as pressure at the base of his skull, the awareness of eyes that didn't understand nuance. He ignored it. Systems don't care about audiences. "Phase 2, he said calmly. The junior engineer hesitated, then acted. Training held. The adjustment rippled cleanly. The building hummed, strained but intact. Applause threatened from somewhere above. He cut it off with a raised hand. "Not yet," he said. "We're not done." A director's voice crackled over comms. "Why aren't we shutting down?" The question carried fear disguised as authority. He answered evenly. "Because shutdown transfers risk to people outside this building," he said. "We absorb it here." Silence followed. Responsibility has weight. Emiko stepped onto the floor then, heels quiet, presence focused. She watched the team work, nodded at decisions she'd once questioned. "What do you need?" she asked him. The question mattered more than any apology. "Time," he said, "and trust." She looked around, then spoke clearly. "You have both." The surge peaked. For a breathless minute, numbers flirted with limits. He adjusted, compensating for a variable only he seemed to anticipate. Years ago, he'd argued this scenario into a budget meeting. It had been cut for optics. Now it lived in muscle memory. The system bent, then held. Cheers erupted upstairs. On the floor, relief arrived quieter. Exhales, nods, hands unclenching. Phones captured the aftermath. Clips spread. Commentary followed. This time, context held. Preparation showed. Mika leaned close. "You just proved it," she said softly. He shook his head. "The team did." She smiled. "That's the point." As stability returned, he documented everything, narrating decisions for the record. Public exposure thrives on transparency. He didn't embellish. He didn't claim heroics. He showed sequence, cause, effect. The narrative wrote itself. Emiko addressed the board on an open channel. "We stayed online without external impact," she said, "because we listened." She glanced toward him, then back to the camera. "That's our standard now." The words landed, recorded. After, as adrenaline faded, he stepped back, letting the engineers bask in earned confidence. He checked his phone. A message from home. "Storm's loud, but we're okay," he replied instantly, reassuring, grounding himself again. Outside, rain lashed the city. Inside, systems held. The contrast felt earned. He wiped his hands, finally allowing a small smile. This wasn't about vindication anymore. It was about proof repeating under pressure. As the shift wound down, Emiko approached him once more. "You were right about habits," she said. "They don't change with speeches." He nodded. "They change with reps." She absorbed that, then extended her hand. He took it, firm, brief. Cameras caught it, but that wasn't the point. He packed his tools, listening to the steady hum he'd come to trust again. Public exposure had matured into expectation. Tomorrow, scrutiny would sharpen. He welcomed it. Scrutiny kept systems honest. When he left the building that night, rain cooling his face, he felt something settle. Not triumph, not relief, but alignment. What he knew, what he did, and what others now saw finally matched. That harmony mattered. He headed home through wet streets, thinking of homework and quiet dinners, of storms outside and stability inside. The world would keep testing. He would keep preparing. And the watching crowd, now educated by evidence, would remember what competence looked like when it mattered most. The rain had passed by morning, leaving the city scrubbed clean and deceptively calm. Inside the tower, the atmosphere felt different again, not urgent this time, but deliberate. After the storm test, no one pretended anymore. Systems had held, decisions had been seen. Accountability was no longer theoretical. He arrived early, as always, coffee still warm in his hand, and found the executive floor already alive. Screens glowed with overnight summaries, incident timelines layered neatly with annotations he'd written himself. The language had shifted from event to case study. That mattered. It meant lessons were being archived, not buried. Emiko Tanaka stood near the main display, jacket on, posture composed. When she saw him, she nodded once, not as a superior acknowledging a subordinate, but as a leader recognizing a peer in purpose. "The board wants a formal review," she said. "Open session." He understood immediately. Open meant witnesses. Open meant no revisions after the fact. The room filled steadily. Directors, senior managers, compliance officers, even external auditors dialed in. Cameras were positioned openly now, no pretense of privacy. He took his place beside the central console, tools absent, hands empty. The work today was explanation. Emiko opened the session without ceremony. "We're here to document what happened, why it worked, and what changes permanently," she said. She turned slightly toward him. "You'll lead the technical review." The words settled, solid. He began at the beginning, not with last night's storm, but with design philosophy. He spoke about margins, about human behavior under pressure, about why systems failed most often at the intersection of ego and physics. He showed data, then showed gaps. He didn't soften conclusions. He didn't assign blame either. He let causality speak. Questions came, sharp and informed now. A director challenged an assumption. He welcomed it, walked through the math, showed alternatives, explained why one path risked cascading harm. The director nodded slowly. Others followed. Agreement grew not from authority, but from clarity. Halfway through, a compliance officer asked the question no one could avoid. Why was this expertise outside decision-making channels? The room stilled. This was the hinge. Emiko answered before he could. "Because we prioritized speed over listening," she said evenly, "and hierarchy over verification." The admission landed heavily, publicly. Cameras captured it. She continued, "That ends today." He felt something ease in his chest. Not satisfaction, but closure. The truth had been named without prompting. That mattered. He resumed, outlining the corrective framework now approved. Mandatory cross-level reviews, preserved legacy safeguards, training rotations that prevented knowledge silos. He emphasized documentation as culture, not bureaucracy. If it isn't written, he said, it didn't happen. Pens moved faster. When the review concluded, the chairwoman spoke. "This is the standard we expect," she said, effective immediately. She looked directly at him. "We're formalizing your role as lead systems consultant." A pause. With authority independent of reporting lines. Murmurs followed. Structural change, not symbolic. He nodded once. "I accept," he said simply. He added, "on the condition that access remains tied to responsibility, not title." Agreement rippled. Emiko met his gaze and nodded. The condition would hold. It was in the record now. As the session ended, people lingered, not to congratulate but to recalibrate. Conversations shifted tone. Questions deepened. He stayed present, answering what he could, deferring what needed time. This was how reform embedded itself, slowly, visibly. Later, alone again by the console, he ran a quiet diagnostic. Baselines steady, alerts dormant. The building felt settled in a way that went beyond numbers. It felt listened to. Emiko joined him there, hands folded, eyes on the data. "You didn't need to stay," she said. He shrugged. "Systems don't rest because meetings end." She considered that, then smiled faintly. "Neither do leaders," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment, two figures from different paths sharing a corrected map. The distance between them felt smaller now, measured, respectful. His phone buzzed. A message from home. "Teacher meeting went well. She did great." Pride swelled, quiet and grounding. He replied with a heart and a promise to be home on time. As he packed up, he noticed a group of junior staff watching from the corridor whispering. He caught one eye and nodded. The whispering stopped. Confidence passed hand to hand like a tool. When he left the building that afternoon, sunlight cut through clouds, sharp and honest. The tower reflected it cleanly. Behind him, policy had shifted, power had adjusted, and truth had been written where it couldn't be erased. This wasn't the end of the work. It was the locking of a foundation. Tomorrow would bring new variables, new pressures. But now, when those pressures came, the system would answer with preparation instead of denial. He walked toward home with an even stride, tools light, mind clear. Dignity had been restored not by applause, but by structure. And structure, once set correctly, had a way of holding, quietly, reliably, long after the cameras moved on. Change never announced itself with applause in the tower. It arrived through calendars, revised checklists, and quieter meetings that ended with decisions actually recorded. He felt it in the way requests came earlier, framed as questions instead of orders, and in how engineers paused to verify assumptions before acting. The building's rhythm had shifted from bravado to caution, from reaction to preparation. That shift carried consequences. Budgets tightened around safeguards instead of marketing. Timelines slowed. Some people resented it. Others adapted. He watched all of it with steady attention, knowing stability was earned daily, never inherited without shortcuts ever again. Formal notices followed, crisp and unavoidable. His role was published internally, responsibilities defined, authority bounded by documentation rather than personality. Some congratulated him awkwardly, others avoided him entirely. The shift exposed fault lines he'd sensed for years. A few managers pushed back quietly, testing limits, hoping habits might return. He responded with process, not confrontation, asking for data, insisting on peer review. Resistance softened under daylight. Training schedules expanded. Incident reports improved. Patterns emerged. Accountability stopped feeling punitive and started feeling shared. The work grew heavier, but it also grew fairer, and that mattered to everyone involved each day forward. Externally, the story traveled with less nuance. Headlines flattened events into moments, faces into symbols. He ignored most of it, focusing instead on outcomes. Vendors adjusted expectations. Partners asked harder questions. Competitors quietly copied changes without credit. That was fine. Influence didn't require attribution. At home, life remained stubbornly ordinary. Mornings meant lunches packed, medication checked, small encouragements whispered before school. Evenings meant homework spread across the table, laughter breaking through fatigue. Those routines grounded him, reminding him why he refused shortcuts when pressure tempted otherwise and kept his priorities clear, steady, humane, consistent. Every single demanding week thereafter always. Inside the company, consequences reached further. Legacy documentation resurfaced, not as relics but as guides. Younger staff gained mentors instead of manuals alone. Reviews changed tone, measuring listening alongside output. Emiko Tanaka adjusted visibly, delegating earlier, inviting dissent without punishment. She didn't become softer, she became sharper in different ways. That evolution carried its own cost, but she accepted it. Leadership, she learned, wasn't diminished by admitting limits. It was strengthened by building structures that survived individual absence, including her own authority, credibility, trust, resilience, patience, foresight, continuity, accountability, humility, permanence, together, daily, publicly, deliberately, consistently, afterward, across teams, organization. For him, recognition arrived sideways. He wasn't invited onto stages or panels. Instead, he was copied on emails earlier, asked to review drafts before release, trusted with decisions that once bypassed him. Respect showed up as preparation. When new hires arrived, they were introduced to him without explanation, told simply to listen. He didn't correct that framing. Authority earned quietly lasted longer. He focused on transferring knowledge, documenting edge cases, ensuring no single person became indispensable. Stability, he believed, should never depend on one pair of hands alone, ever, anywhere, again, regardless of pressure, ego, urgency, circumstance, or fear returning. The social ripple extended beyond offices. Maintenance staff across sites shared notes, comparing experiences, feeling seen for the first time. Small process changes reduced injuries, reduced overtime, reduced silent stress. None of it made headlines. That pleased him. Real progress rarely did. He answered messages from strangers asking how to speak up, how to prepare. His replies stayed simple. Learn the system. Document everything. Protect people first. Courage, he knew, grew best when paired with competence. Alone, bravery burned out. Together, they endured through uncertainty, scrutiny, repetition, accountability, patience, discipline, time, seasons, change, setbacks, doubt, pressure, fatigue, renewal, growth, resilience. Late one evening, as he shut down his terminal, he noticed the hum again, steady and honest. He rested his palm against the console, feeling vibration translate into reassurance. Systems spoke clearly when treated with respect. He carried that lesson home, applying it to conversations, to parenting, to himself. Mistakes would still happen, pressure would return, but denial had lost its shelter. Transparency had muscle now. That knowledge brought a quiet peace, not complacency, just readiness. Tomorrow would bring new variables. He would meet them prepared, alert, patient, grounded, consistent, thoughtful, careful, Measured, resilient, observant, disciplined, confident, steady, present, always. The company moved forward, altered, not redeemed, but better aligned with reality. He understood the difference. Redemption belonged to stories. Alignment belonged to work. As he turned out the lights and headed home, he thought of the day he'd been told to say it again, slowly, like ignorance could be fixed with mockery. The memory no longer burned. It informed. Public rooms remembered, systems remembered. He remembered too, and when the next voice tried to dismiss someone quietly holding the truth, there would be witnesses ready, attentive, prepared, disciplined, informed, steady, patient, principled, capable, united, alert, listening, watching, responding, together. The building eased into its evening rhythm as if it had learned something permanent. Lights dimmed in stages. Systems checked themselves without complaint. He stood alone for a moment listening, not for alarms, but for balance. The hum answered steadily, honest and unforced. That sound meant more to him than any title ever could. It meant the work had held. It meant people would go home safely, sleep through storms, trust mornings again. He logged the final notes of the day, precise and complete, then signed out, satisfied not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was pretending anymore. Outside, the city breathed in cooler air. He walked without hurry, hands loose, shoulders unburdened. The past weeks replayed without sting now, mockery, dismissal, the pause before understanding landed. Those moments no longer defined him, they informed him. He'd learned that dignity didn't demand noise, only consistency. That preparation wasn't flashy, but it was contagious. That public exposure wasn't about shaming power, but about teaching it where its blind spots lived. Those lessons would outlast him. And that was the point. Systems, like people, needed truths they could keep returning to. At home, dinner waited late and warm. His daughter met him at the door, already talking, already alive with plans for tomorrow. He listened, fully present, knowing this ordinary chaos was the truest measure of success. He helped with homework, corrected gently, praised specifically. When she asked why buildings broke sometimes, he explained simply that listening mattered. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. He watched her for a moment longer than necessary, anchoring himself again in what mattered most. Later, after dishes and stories, after lights dimmed and quiet settled, he sat by the window with a notebook. He wrote nothing dramatic, just reminders. Check assumptions. Document decisions. Teach what you know, protect people first. He smiled faintly at the simplicity. The world loved complexity because it hid responsibility. He preferred clarity. It demanded courage, but it paid interest. Tomorrow would test it again somewhere else, with different faces, different stakes. He felt ready, not because he was fearless, but because he was prepared. News clips would fade. Headlines would move on. Inside the company, reforms would harden into routine. Some would forget how close it had come. Others wouldn't. He accepted both outcomes. Change didn't require universal memory, only enough witnesses to keep denial from returning comfortably. He'd seen how quickly silence could be weaponized. Now he'd seen how documentation could disarm it. That balance felt earned. He closed the notebook and turned off the lamp, content with quiet progress. Before sleep, he checked his phone once more. Messages from colleagues were brief now, focused, respectful. No urgency, no panic. That absence felt like success. He replied to one, asking for advice with the same line he always used. Learn the system, write it down, speak early. Then he set the phone aside. Rest mattered. Exhaustion bred mistakes. Prepared minds needed sleep. He lay back, breathing evenly, the steady hum of a city replacing the steady hum of machines, both reassuring in their own ways. Morning would bring new variables, it always did. But denial had lost its shelter, and preparation had gained allies. That equation favored safety, dignity, and quiet competence. He drifted toward sleep with that certainty, knowing the work would continue without applause, without spectacle, and without him needing to explain himself again. That felt like justice enough. Systems would keep listening. People would keep learning. And when someone underestimated the wrong person in the wrong room, there would be witnesses ready. Before you go, tell me the title of the next story you want to hear. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Famous singer forced black girl to sing alone to mock her. However, she hit notes. He never could. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?